When war forces innovation, something extraordinary happens, and Ukraine's FrankenSAM is proof of that. This hybrid air defense system is so effective on the battlefield that even the US, with its vast military arsenal, now wants it. What began as Ukraine's ingenious response to overwhelming Russian airstrikes has turned into a powerful weapon that's caught the eye of the world's most advanced military. But what makes FrankenSAM so revolutionary, and why has it become such a coveted asset for the US? As we dive into its origins, its impact on Ukraine's defenses, and how it's reshaping modern warfare, one thing becomes clear. When necessity meets innovation, even the strongest militaries take notice. Let's dive in. FrankenSAM, as you've probably guessed, is a mashup of the words Frankenstein and SAM, or surface-to-air missile. On July 8, 2024, the Senate Armed Services Committee, or SASC, filed its 2025 Defense Policy Bill with the US Senate. It called for the US Secretary of Defense to provide a briefing to the Congressional Defense Committees looking into the US Air Force's use of the FrankenSAM, or at least the overarching concept behind it, no later than March 31, 2025. The SASC document presented before the Senate shed some light on what previously were murky details about how and why the FrankenSAM systems came to be developed in the first place. They were conceived in late 2022, early 23, as a solution to Ukraine's urgent requirement for more robust ground-based air defense capabilities to deal with the constant aerial bombardment by Russian crewed aircraft, drones, and cruise missiles. These attacks had intensified and spread to energy and other critical infrastructure in response to Ukraine's bombing of the Kerch Bridge that links the Crimean Peninsula to the Russian mainland on October 8, 2022, making the need for improved air defense systems even more critical. But there were two big problems in helping the Ukrainians. Although the US and fellow NATO allies like the UK and Germany had stockpiles of the air defense missiles that Ukraine needed ready to go, the Ukrainians couldn't use them. That's because the SAMs used by the Ukrainian Armed Forces, or UAF, such as the BUK M1 and S-300P, were all Russian-made from the Soviet era. The launchers for those systems simply weren't able to handle modern Western missiles. The Ukrainians needed launchers along with the missiles, but US-made SAM air defense launchers weren't anywhere near as abundant as the missiles they fire. For example, the US only has around 60 Patriot systems in total itself. The full systems are not quick or cheap to make, costing about $1 billion each, so there are only so many that can be sent to Ukraine, and that number is not enough to cover what they need. That left Ukrainian officials asking their allies for help in finding appropriate missiles for the 60 Soviet BUK missile launchers lying idle in the arsenal because they were running low. But realizing that it would be difficult for the West to obtain Russian-made ammunition, they came up with the idea of converting the launchers to use NATO-caliber anti-aircraft missiles instead and offered to start building them. Around 8 months later, in October 2023, the first FrankenSAM successfully arrived in Ukraine, a unique hybrid air defense system combining Western missiles and other components with Soviet-era missile launchers. Today, according to Oleksandr Kamshin, the head of the Ukrainian Ministry of Strategic Industries, there are about 5 such projects already deployed to the battlefield. But so far, only 3 hybrid weapons that are the fruits of the joint Ukrainian-US program developing FrankenSAMs domestically in Ukraine have been seen in action. Kamshin may have been referring to the British Supercat ASRAM hybrid system that's been specially adapted for Ukraine and spotted in the wild, or the exciting new Frankentank concept recently announced by Rheinmetall from Germany. We'll come back to those later, but first, what are the 3 Ukrainian US-made FrankenSAMs that the US Air Force is so adamant about implementing? Interestingly, the SASC's Senate document refers to systems on trucks or stationary pallets. This is an intriguing detail, as there have been no reports of Ukraine using such FrankenSAM configurations. The only known truck-mounted air defense system provided to Ukraine is the British Supercat ASRAM system, which features an AIM-132 ASRAM missile launcher mounted on a 6x6 Supercat all-terrain truck chassis with a twin-rail launcher for a pair of missiles mounted at the rear. The 3 FrankenSAM systems currently in use are 1. Soviet BUK SAM systems adapted to fire RIM-7 missiles, 2. A Soviet radar system modified to guide AIM-9M missiles, and 3. A hybrid system combining launchers and missiles from the Patriot air defense system with Soviet-made S-300 radars. While there are no publicly available figures as to how many of each of these systems are active on the battlefield, it seems a safe bet that the first of the 3 systems, the modified BUK, is the most widely deployed. Back in October 2023, Ukrainian MP Oleksandra Ustinova told journalists that it had taken a month for US specialists to modify 5 BUKs, with 17 more pending. If they've kept up that rate of production, it's possible all 60 of Ukraine's BUK stockpile could have been converted into FrankenSAMs by now. This system is, in essence, a BUK M1 or 9A310 launcher modified to use RIM-7 Sea Sparrow missiles, instead of the standard 9M38 missiles for which it was designed. Although no match for modern Western equivalents, the BUK, also known as the SA-11 Gadfly, is still a sturdy piece of gear that was a stalwart of the Soviet Army in the years before the USSR's collapse in 1991. It's 30.5 feet long, weighs 32.4 tons, and has a speed of 40 miles per hour. It carries a crew of 4, and in its original configuration also carried 4 9M38M1 missiles. Ukraine's stockpile of these missiles has understandably been depleted to a large extent, which is why their BUKs needed to be converted to handle Western missiles like the Sea Sparrow instead. The RIM-7 Sea Sparrow is a SAM developed by Raytheon and General Dynamics for the United States Navy. It's a ship-launched variant of the AIM-7 Sparrow air-to-air missile, designed for point defense against anti-ship missiles, aircraft, and low-flying cruise missiles. It was first developed in 1976 and goes for around $165,000 each today. It features radar-guided, semi-automatic homing, a rather destructive annular blast fragmentation warhead, and a dual-thrust rocket motor for improved range and maneuverability. With ongoing upgrades and improvements to better deal with UAVs and sea-skimming targets, it's a missile that's stood the test of time. And the US has warehouses full of them. Because it's essentially a sea missile adapted into a SAM, there are a few trade-offs in using the RIM-7 instead of the 9M38M1 on a BUK. The engagement range will be 12.5 miles with an altitude ceiling of 9.3 miles, as opposed to around 18.5 miles for the BUK-launched 9M38M1. But the RIM-7 is 3 times lighter, 507 pounds versus 1,521 pounds, 6.5 feet shorter and half as wide. This means you can load more missiles on a single launcher, and they're likely to be more accurate, albeit at the cost of roughly a third of the range. The modification of the BUK to handle RIM-7s was simplified somewhat by the fact that both the RIM-7 and the 9M38 use semi-active laser guidance. So the main challenge was really to make the missiles see the target designation provided by the BUK's 9S35 radar as if it was a Mark 115, Mark 95, or Mark 23 radar. It's not clear whether the standard radar was modified or replaced entirely with a US system in this FrankenSAM. But either way, clearly it works. The second type of FrankenSAM, a Soviet radar system modified to guide AIM-9M Sidewinder missiles, might be even easier to adapt, according to some experts. That's because the AIM-9M doesn't need target illumination, instead relying on its own homing head. All the system operator has to do is show the target, program the homing head, let the missile lock on, and press launch. What's more, either a modern optical aiming station or even an ordinary sight is sufficient for launching an AIM-9M. The AIM-9M also offers flexibility in the type of chassis on which the launchers can be mounted, because the dimensions of the missiles are quite moderate. It weighs about 187 pounds, is under 10 feet long, 5 inches in diameter, and has a wingspan of 11 inches. The AIM-9M, AIM being short for Air Intercept Missile, is a supersonic, short-range, air-to-air variant of the AIM-9 Sidewinder family, developed by Raytheon since the 1980s. It features improved IRCCM, which stands for Infrared Countermeasures, and a digital ignition safety device. It also has high off-bore sight capabilities, allowing the missile to track targets at high seeker gimbal angles or highly distant from its bore sight. Although it's essentially an air-to-air missile rather than a SAM, it's been used in a SAM system before, namely in the MIM-72 Chaparral. This obsolete US-developed SAM was able to use fine-tuned AIM-9D missiles to destroy targets within a 3-mile range, at an altitude up to 2.5 miles. There's unfortunately not much information available on how the AIM-9M integrates with Soviet radar systems. However, in addition to its adaptability, another compelling reason to use the AIM-9M is that since it's largely been replaced by the more advanced AIM-9X by the US Armed Forces, there are significant quantities spread around warehouses throughout the US and its allied nations that can be quickly and easily made available to Ukraine. That brings us to the third variety of FrankenSAM, which is also the most powerful and secretive, the FrankenSAM with Patriot missiles. Patriot stands for Phased Array Tracking Radar for Intercept on Target. Because there are very few details publicly available about this system, we can only speculate as to which radar system and chassis have been merged with Patriot components. There are three likely candidates: the BUK M1, the Soviet-made S-300, and a modern, fully digital Ukrainian system like the ATK-6 KS-1 Phoenix. All Patriot missiles, both the GEM-T, which is deployed against aerodynamic targets, and the CRI-MSC anti-missile interceptors, require radio command guidance in the initial stage of the engagement, which is provided by the AN/MPQ-53, AN/MPQ-65, or the newer LTAMDS radar. It's these radar components of the Patriot system that are the rarest, most expensive, take the longest to make, and are therefore most problematic to ship to Ukraine. While it's unknown which Soviet or Ukrainian radar has been modified to be able to launch Patriot missiles, one thing is for sure: transfer of only the launchers, loaders, and a few support vehicles without the core AN/MPQ-53 or AN/MPQ-65 radars is bound to be easier, faster, and much more cost-effective. This holds true whether the FrankenSAM Patriot is used in Ukraine or to defend airfields and infrastructure on the US mainland, as envisioned by the SASC. Raytheon's MIM-104 Patriot missile is of course a much more powerful projectile than either the RIM-7 Sea Sparrow or AIM-9M Sidewinder used in the other FrankenSAM varieties. For one, it's an actual SAM system designed to detect, track, and engage a wide range of aerial targets, including aircraft, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. Each system consists of a mobile launching station, a radar unit, and a control center, with each launching station carrying up to 4 missiles. The system can be easily transported and redeployed and uses advanced phased array radar, which provides 360-degree coverage and can detect targets at long ranges. Patriot missiles have a range of 43.5 miles, an altitude of 79,000 to 98,000 feet, a speed of up to Mach 3.5, and cost a cool $1 to $6 million per missile, depending on the variant and configuration. Although they're the most powerful of the SAM missiles incorporated into FrankenSAMs that we know about, they're also not the kind of missiles you want to be indiscriminately firing to shoot down Gerund-2 drones, otherwise known as flying lawnmowers, which cost 50 times less at minimum. Unfortunately, other than a few official and unofficial videos and pictures of them, that's just about all that's actually known for sure about the FrankenSAM project. Publicly known for sure, that is. Although no details are provided in their document presented to the Senate, the SASC must have assessed the Ukrainians' experience of using the FrankenSAM in combat favorably to come to the conclusion that the US Air Force should look seriously at adapting it for its own use, specifically for air-based defense. But why would the US Air Force, or indeed the Department of Defense as a whole, need hybrid SAM systems to defend its air bases, especially back home, ingenious as the FrankenSAM may be? Aren't they protected by the world's biggest arsenal of the world's most sophisticated weapon systems already? Well, yes and no. Things change, and sometimes they change fast. The committee recognizes that the standard budget and acquisition process of the Department of Defense, or DoD for short, does not allow for agile development and rapid procurement of innovative technological solutions designed to solve real-world strategies, the SASC contends. However, today's continually evolving threats require the DoD to adapt and allow for creative and agile responses to emergent problems. If you think about how rapidly warfare has evolved in just the last couple of years with UAVs, electronic warfare, maritime drones, hypersonic missiles, and surveillance becoming decisive factors on the battlefield, you can see where they're coming from. And that's where FrankenSAM comes in, they say. The core of FrankenSAM leverages easy-to-use, proven technologies that limit the dependence on component development timelines, while emphasizing integration of existing and new equipment into an open architecture system. The modular approach of the system can be quickly integrated into existing air defense systems where gaps may occur in protecting installations, or providing quick reaction, standalone point defense where a larger comprehensive air defense system may not exist. FrankenSAM could allow the DoD to kill two birds with one stone. Firstly, the US has stockpiles of perfectly good and deadly missiles and related equipment that are more or less lying redundant because they've been replaced by upgraded models. These are, in many cases, the models currently being produced for both use by the US and its allies, who have also upgraded their systems. By repurposing this stock of older missiles, launchers, and other components for use in hybrid systems like the FrankenSAM, a large, readily available arsenal that's already bought and paid for is created. That seems like a very effective way to address one of the few known weaknesses in US defense, which is in the area of short-range air defense, or SHORAD. This weakness in air defense has arisen precisely because warfare has evolved so fast, especially in the air. The US military's footprint both at home and around the world is so huge that it hasn't quite had time to catch up everywhere yet. There are holes. FrankenSAM offers an easy fix, both to plug the short-term holes and to provide an agile, rapidly deployable, mobile air defense solution for use almost anywhere. So where are the holes and how can FrankenSAM plug them? Thomas Newdick sums it up well in his comprehensive article for the Warzone. It's no secret that the US military in general has a SHORADS deficit. Limited numbers of ground-based air defenses also extend to the supplies of longer-range systems like the Patriot, and there's no mid-tier system fielded by the US military in significant numbers. The realities of future conflicts likely being fought in non-permissive aerial environments have forced a shift in thinking, and with SHORADS being needed sooner rather than later, a semi-off-the-shelf solution like a FrankenSAM system is obviously of interest. Air bases are particularly vulnerable, he says, especially those far from home, and in increasingly contested environments. The threats from any combination of low-flying fighter aircraft, helicopters, cruise missiles, and drones that might be employed by China, for example, against an airfield used by the US Air Force in the Pacific will be complex and varied. The ability to protect against cruise missiles and drones that might have penetrated the outer layers of the air defenses and directly threaten the airbase and the critical assets that it hosts could well make the difference between victory and defeat. Very small units that are far forward deployed in less conspicuous areas and those farther back will also need some form of protection against lower volume aerial threats. Sure, at an airbase you might expect there to be crewed fighters to tackle incoming drone and missile threats, but in the event of a large conflict, they're likely to be needed everywhere, making it all the more important that airfields are defended by dedicated SHORADS. At the same time, inside the US itself, air bases and much other critical infrastructure have been shown to be potentially vulnerable, particularly to drone attacks. The country is so big and drone technology is so pervasive that it's hard to keep up with the vulnerabilities, let alone patch them. For these reasons, it's not hard to see why the configurable and highly mobile FrankenSAM is of such interest to the US military. They should be fairly easy to transport by air, so can simply be assembled and flown into the bases where they're needed, even on very short notice. Once in theater, they'd be able to move quickly to new locations, making them unpredictable and harder to target, an important factor when faced with long-range drone and cruise missile attacks. They could even be installed as platforms in semi-permanent locations or at sea aboard support vessels and sea bases. Meanwhile, perhaps inspired by the FrankenSAM, Ukraine will soon be receiving a different flavor of reconstituted SHORAD in the form of Rheinmetall's Frankenstein air defense tank. That's the German innovation hinted at earlier in the video. The Frankenstein air defense tank consists of an advanced German Skyranger anti-aircraft gun mounted on a Leopard 1 battle tank. The Skyranger 30 is a mobile system capable of engaging fixed and rotary wing aircraft, Group 1 and 2 unmanned aerial systems, loitering munitions, and cruise missiles. With a weight of around 2 to 2.5 tons, it can be installed on lighter 6x6 wheeled vehicles and operated both autonomously and in networked operations. It's fitted with a modified version of the Oerlikon KCA 1.28-inch gun. It has an effective range of 1.86 miles, a rate of fire of 1,200 rounds per minute, and the ability to elevate 85 degrees to combat terminal diving targets. The total payload of 7 ounces is time-programmed upon leaving the muzzle to open up in front of a target to form a lethal cone. To detect targets, the Skyranger 30 uses the S-band AESA multi-mission radar (AMMR) developed by Rheinmetall Italia, with 5 flat antennas integrated around the turret, providing full 360-degree coverage. For passive detection, it's installed with Rheinmetall's first fast infrared search and track, which is optimized to detect pop-up targets such as helicopters. Identification and tracking are handled by a compact target tracker that includes an HD-cooled MWIR thermal camera, 1 Full HD TV camera, and 2 laser rangefinders, one devoted to air targets and the other to land targets. Additional features include 2 ROSI, or Rapid Obscuring System launchers, each with 9 multispectral smoke grenades, a hatch in the hull ceiling to view the battlefield from outside, and a coaxial machine gun fitted on the left of the main gun for use as a self-defense weapon. It's an impressive-sounding system, and one likely to be welcomed by Ukraine with open arms, and the sooner they receive them, the better. It's also probable that the German DoD, like its American counterparts, is also eyeing the holes in its own SHORAD systems and evaluating how the Frankenstein air defense tank and other ways of creatively reconstituting its arsenal might be put to use plugging those holes. But with the US and its allies like Germany increasingly drawn into conflicts around the world, from Ukraine to Israel and the Red Sea to the South China Sea, Newdick says, time may be fast running out to procure and field such systems. As for the FrankenSAMs, wouldn't it be fitting if a system developed under a crash program to provide a rapid and inexpensive solution for Ukraine ends up becoming a long-term critical part of US air defense and beyond? Please let us know what you think in the comments, and thank you as always for watching the video. Now go and check out how Ukraine's sniper rifle Horizon's Lord is terrorizing Putin's army, or click this other video instead.